Alright, so I'm out here on Saturday morning. It's been exactly 1 week ago today that I first put the tray in place. So that seems like a long amount of time, but it's not like detailed work or like long hours in the bike. It's been none of that. I'm actually just waiting on parts. I'm in a pretty good place. What I'm currently waiting on is for my Evap kit, the kit to delete the Evap system from the bike. Monday I'll get that in and I'm going to test fire the bike, make sure I haven't messed anything up yet. And once I've gotten that taken care of, once I know the bike runs how I want it to run, it's time for the lengthened battery leads, which that's actually what I'm going to be working on this morning. I've gotten all my parts in from Amazon for that. So this is gonna be my first attempt at that, so we'll see how it goes. Once the Evap kit's on, once the new leads are on, I can actually put this all back together as a functioning bike with an Airbox delete. Hopefully, that will be by the end of Monday. So that's why I'm making up these cables now, so it's an easy swap out, and then I can put it all together, and we'll have a bike that's 95% done by Monday. The process that I'm going to follow for making the battery leads is what I saw on Revival Cycle's YouTube page. They do some wonderful tech talks, and one of them was specifically how to make battery leads. I've got some new 8-gauge wire, which is what this bike comes with. It's a lot more flexible than what came on the bike, so that'll be nice. That'll be great for running and trying to tuck this where I need it to be. And then I'm going to attach them, instead of crimping them, I'm actually going to use a flood solder method, which is what Revival is showing on their channel. What I've got is some new 8-gauge wire, some 8-gauge terminal lugs, and then a torch. So for this solder method, we're gonna basically heat the terminal, use that heat to then infill with some solder. I'm gonna strip this guy just about the right length that I need to get it down in this terminal lug. Probably give it a little bit of extra back there. It's actually giving me pretty good confidence in this wire that I bought here. It is some thick insulation that it's got on the outside of it, which is good since we're going to be using this black wire for our positive as well as our negative, because we certainly don't want that shorting out anywhere. Okay, so here's our stripped wire. I'm going to put it in my terminal lug here, just like that. Now I will get the wire held in my bench vise here. Okay, there it is. I can see the liquidation happening like they talked about, so now I'm going to introduce my solder. Oh, that got me. That burned me quickly. And I'm going to have to stop it because I'm directly under a fire. So, I'm going to give this another go and try not to set up the fire alarm this time. Well, obviously, an annoying way, I'm going to have to find a better place to do this, but that's the idea. That's not the prettiest thing I have ever made, but it does look like it'll work. So the solder flooded in there well, it's held in place. It's not going anywhere. I was also able to bend this connector to a 90, which I know I'll need to do that to at least one of the leads that goes into the starter motor. So overall, this is pretty good. That heat alone was melting some of the insulation from the wiring, so I'm gonna try and figure out how to avoid that. But I think that this is gonna work out for us. I think I should be able to go ahead and do the negative cable in entirety. The positive, I'm gonna wait, but go ahead and do some ends to see how this goes. Okay, yeah, that looks a lot better. So careful modulating your temperature, super low temperature coming out of your torch. That looks a lot more like what I hope to see. So here's my progress. This was my first one. Kind of made a mess out of the solder. In general, I think it worked, but I also had a lot of, it's really stiff pretty far down the cable, because I think I had solder going the wrong way and everything else. And this is the second go. So a little bit better job modulating my heat. I've got a nice puddle of solder right here where I want it. I didn't get the melting of the insulation this time. And so now that piece of heat shrink I have should just slide over this. Should make a really nice joint out of that. And here it is after the shrink wrap's in place. So having never done this before, pretty happy with it, especially if it actually works. Now that I've got this first terminal end done, I'm gonna feed it down and get it positioned in the correct place on the bike, cut this to length, and then go ahead and put the terminal on the other end, and then my ground wire should be done. I've got my new length of ground wire cut, but I just remembered I actually can't go ahead and put the battery end on this just yet, because I will need to splice this connector in that runs off to the other side. I'm gonna leave all of the wiring harness completely untouched until I get a chance to test start the bike and make sure that nothing is wrong in that position first. And once I know that I haven't touched it and it all works, then I'll start putting in my new battery leads and then, and tightening up wiring and whatever else, just to make sure I don't mess anything up along the way. So for now, this is all I'm gonna do to this ground wire. All right guys, so today is 13 days since I took the first parts off of this, which included a lot of waiting on parts, such as this, which is the tiny little resistor that I've been waiting on to finalize the Evap delete. Now that I've got that kit in, I'm going to leave the stock loom completely as it is, connect the battery, and I'm gonna make sure that it starts and runs. Once I know that that is working correctly, then I'm gonna start switching out for my longer battery leads. And my hope would be that by the end of tonight, I should be able to put the bike back together as a complete package that runs for the first time. So that's exciting, looking forward to it, and we'll see what happens. I think I may be able to get away with this being the last time I put the fuel tank on the bike. So I'm gonna go ahead and make sure that my indicators are plugged back in before I get it completely situated. All right, so for those of us with an Evap system, your airbox is here behind the cover, and then there's a big canister that lays basically right on top of the swing arm under the whole airbox. It'll have a hose that goes from it to this little guy. This guy will have this connector plugged in. So this connector here will be plugged in to this little sensor right here. And then this rubber hose will run up and into the top of this back there. So there's some hose back there, and there's a little nipple that hose will connect to. Now for the Evap removal kit, there's a new plug that I'm gonna plug into the receiving end. So it's gonna simulate this, and it's just gonna plug right into there. And then the other part of this is that this hosing back here that connects, one goes to each throttle body, and I'll need to plug those with the rubber caps that come in the kit. To get to those, there's a 4mm hex head bolt in the top of the little fake carburetor caps here. You're gonna take that bolt out, obviously, and then this will just lift off. And then you can see we've got two hoses down here. So on each side of the bike, there's gonna be an inner and an outer. You're gonna remove and cap the inner ones. So we're gonna pull that off, cap it, put our little pieces back on top here, plug the eliminator into its sensor, and then that should be it for the Evap portion of this. Here we come to this weird gap in my footage where I managed to shoot nothing transitional. But what's going on here is that my Evap delete kit is installed, and I'm getting the battery wired up to the factory loom so I can finally see if the bike will start. This is my first time to see if, with everything I've done, with everything I've taken apart and put back together, will the bike start as it sits. All right, well, here goes hopefully something. I'm gonna turn the key here just a couple times just to make sure that the fuel system is primed. good. Bike started, sputtered. You'll see it sputter a couple times and whatever. These bikes actually usually take 2 starts anyway. But so it's going. You know, the ECU is now trying to compensate for a lot that's new. Mainly, obviously, the pod filters. So it'll have to go through a self-learn process. Wanted to make sure it would run and stay running. So now that that's good, I'm gonna start swapping out my leads one at a time and go from there. So I'm gonna pop off this side cover real quick so I can get to the battery lead. I do want to get to it and see exactly what I'm gonna be dealing with after that. To pull this cover off, it's just 4 bolts, 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, and this will stay attached. So once you've got the cover off, there are gonna be 2 more nuts that are holding on the reservoir. So there's one up here and there's one kind of hidden down below here. Pull those off and then this comes out. And so then there is this cover and we're gonna have to get that out of the way as well, which it looks like 2 more bolts here and here. This is the lead that's coming off. This is what you're trying to get to. So it comes down off the starter motor and then loops up and then hides kind of behind this plastic to keep, well, that out of all that wiring. So it goes up and around the back there and then spits this lead out the side here. So what I'm trying to do is get to that so that I can run a whole new one of these. And what I'll do is make this one solid piece from the starter all the way up the frame rail until it gets to the solenoid here. This is the lead that goes from the battery to the solenoid. And that one, obviously, I can cut down and put a new end on it, and that should be good. It's time to run my new starter motor wire. So I'm gonna attach it and run it up through. Once I get the length right, I'm gonna cut it, put the new end on it, and that'll be the first new wire that I try out. So when I made my new cable the other day, I used this cloth wrap tape that I got on Amazon, which I wasn't super happy with. When I took off the wire that goes to the starter motor, I was happy to find that this is actually a split loom, kind of like what I did on the other side. So I'm actually gonna steal this split loom, put it on here. That'll help give it a even more like factory look. So here is my extended lead from the starter solenoid to the starter motor. This is the split loom, and then here's my new end that I bent a 90 into. I'm gonna make sure that fits behind the starter solenoid. And so from wire end to wire end, so not including the terminals themselves, it was right at 39.5 inches. I've got the relay up here where it's supposed to be with my new extended wire, although it's not completely buttoned in, it's still loose down here. I do have the split loom here, and I've got the rubber boot from the factory, so actually this will all look stock from what you can see. I've got it temporarily run up here right now, run to the starter solenoid, solenoid to the battery. Let's see if it fires. First go at using one of my cables here. We've got power. I'm gonna have to hold the clutch, I suppose. Let's see. That is great news. Since the lead going from the solenoid to the battery is now too long, and because I couldn't find a good solution for the lugs at the solenoid, one, I used these and just bent them to 90 degrees. But since this one was already too long, well, this is how I have modified my positive battery cable. I left the end on that's gonna go to the solenoid, cut it to length, soldered on my new tip, got some heat shrink. I'm gonna get it in place and then modify this guy to be the best shape for how the terminal sits now, but just to give it some coverage. And for those who may have caught my mistake, I did go back and get some red shrink wrap to designate this as the positive terminal. Now it runs with 2 of my wires. 1 left to go, and it should be more or less done. All right, we are so close to being done with this. What I did last night was that I got my battery leads installed on the bike. So the ones that I made on the positive side. So from the starter motor to the solenoid, from the solenoid to the battery, that's done. It all worked. The bike ran with it Awesome. Tonight, I have the negative cable left to go. I'm gonna get that on there. Once I know that it works, it'll be time for an assembly. So at that point, I can get the wheel back on the bike, I can put the seat on the bike, the tank's already on the bike. Everything should be as it will be when the bike is completely done. And from there, I would consider it small cleanup things, wiring here and there, a zip tie here and there, maybe some loom cover. But the bike will be in a ready to run, Airbox free form. For your ground wire, one of the ends, the one that goes to the frame, is just gonna be a standard lug. But at the other end on the bike, you'll notice there's this little connector spliced in. So I'm actually going to have to splice that connector into this. I'm gonna cut it free of the factory lug, trim that back, and then I'll just solder it in at the same time that I solder the ground wire lug end. Yeah, so of course, this very last one is definitely not my proudest. It's kind of a mess, actually. And my problem here was 8-gauge wire, 8-gauge lug terminals, plus the addition of this probably, I don't know, 10-gauge, maybe 12-gauge wire. They just didn't play well together. So they're in there, there's enough solder, they're holding good. I would recommend probably the next highest lug or so to make this work, but it's in there, it is held good. So I am going to shrink wrap that and then give it a go and we'll see. And boom, there's the miracle of shrink wrap. All right, everything is in. Battery's down here, so my new leads are going to it. Everything's relatively low profile. Pretty sure I've got room for the seat now and pop it on in a minute regardless, but just about to do a first test start with everything in the tray where it goes. Test fire, battery in place, leads installed, everything in the tray. That is a success. That is awesome. This Crafton seat has a little more room underneath it, so I'm gonna go ahead and pop it on first because I think I'm gonna have to slightly modify the OEM seat to make it fit. Yeah, so I had to fiddle with it a little bit to make sure I was clearing all the wiring underneath, but it does. That is it. Awesome. I had a previous conversation with Rish about this, and I thought this was going to be the case. I know that he did it. I'm getting ready to do it too. These need to go. The one on rider's right side, which is where the main wiring loom is coming in, you can't really avoid it. So I'm going to take a Dremel, take these off all the way around, and then this seat should go on there no problem. That is what we in the home garage business call OEM Plus. This is the part where I was gonna come back and say, oh, JK, look, I took the Dremel and I sanded it and made it better, but it actually just didn't get that much better. So, RIP factory seat. So as of last night, the bike is back together with everything in the tray, and my stock seat as well as my passenger seat both fit. So now I need to take some cable ties and get some stuff cleaned up a little bit underneath, and I'm gonna throw the rear wheel on, and then the bike will be ready to ride. The goal would be for in the next 2 hours or so to have a rideable bike. Pretty excited to be at this point. It is 2 weeks and a day since I first took parts off this bike. I do think, looking back, you know, if I'd known what I was doing, so if I was doing this again, I have my list of parts that I know that I need. I didn't wait on any of them. I think that on a Friday evening, as soon as I got off work, I could start going on this, put a couple of long days in, Saturday and Sunday, and be done with it in a weekend. As I said, it's taking me 2 weeks. I think that's probably gonna be more the average. It's probably more what you would expect, especially the first time doing it. But now knowing how everything comes apart, where everything can go, what I did that I had to undo later, you know, what I could have done that I didn't do right away, all of those sort of things, not to mention, like I said, the several days that I just spent waiting on parts in the middle of this and little pieces of this and that I needed. I think this would be a pretty quick project. Anyway, that's all I'll say about that. Hopefully this will be your last one of these introductions from me, and go from here. I have to say that I'm pretty happy with that. I like how that loom turned out. Everything's tucked away pretty good. I just need us to need everyone doing this kit to make a pact to never show anyone what it looks like under the seat. So admittedly, this isn't exactly how I had hoped to do this part of this video, but the bike has already been done for several months and I've been dragging my feet, but I love how it has turned out. I've told Rish this, I've met Rish since then, and I think it's about time that you guys get to see how this bike turned out, and I think you're gonna love it. So without further delay, here is my 2016 Thruxton R with its completed airbox delete. As you can see, we've got the DNA filters making up for what was removed. You've got the tray tucked nicely under there. And a personal touch that I've added would be this underseat bag so that I did not have to get rid of my frame tags and I can add some usability. And this was done by a close friend of mine. He has an Instagram page. It's @patchwork_leather. And he custom made this bag for me. We troubleshot it a couple times. If you do this and are interested, he should be able to work out something similar for you. We've got these nice magnetic clasps holding it shut. It's good enough to get everything out of my pockets, which I super appreciate. When I get down here, you can see the tray tucked up in there nicely. It hides really well between the two shock mounts. Well, y'all, that's about it for this project. I hope that you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed doing it, and as much as I've enjoyed riding the bike now that it's finished. If you want to see more of it, follow me on Instagram @WPanicPhotog. There'll always be plenty of content of that bike on there. And while the Thruxton may actually finally be finished, I've got a couple more bikes and maybe there's more to come for them. Thanks for hanging around my channel for this series. Hopefully I'll have some more for you in the future, and I hope you'll tune in for that as well.